So to those 7 steps. The first thing that we ask people to do, and this is a step that belongs to the owner of the asset, is that we ask you to go to our website and give us the very most basic of information about the site. I'll come back to those pages in a second. Following that, one of our engineers will be in touch, and we will, by interviewing your staff, your staff on site, and contractors that you may identify, we'll gather what we believe to be the most important information that will allow us to produce in step 3 an initial appraisal of the technical and commercial aspects of going ahead with demand response at that site. That's your first decision point, and at that point, if the decision is positive, then we will need to see the site, and that involves a morning or an afternoon with one of our engineers at the site, interviewing your people, understanding the assets, understanding site operations, and learning about how a demand response installation could actually be implemented and what the effect would be. That information allows us, together with you, to work up the financials, which again creates another decision point. And if that's positive, then implementation can occur. We always work with contractors who are already incumbent at the site if they are available. We find it's better to always work with people who are familiar with the site and its operations, but our engineers are involved throughout the process, providing guidance, attending at site, and are heavily involved in the commissioning, testing, and handover process. And the final step is the site goes live and demand response commences. Just quickly touching on a couple of those earlier steps, just to give you a view of what they're like. The online fact find is a very simple web form, which varies depending on the types of assets. Hopefully you can see some of the pages that come through. This is a relatively new form, so we're obviously very keen also to hear from you about whether or not this form works for you and whether you think we could tweak it. But it is intended to be a very basic first cut. The second cut, step 2, we mentioned more detailed information. Every half-hourly electricity consumer has a right to receive a summary half-hour by half-hour of all of the electricity that he or she has consumed. And typically this comes in a spreadsheet from the electricity supplier. This is one example there. We can learn an awful lot from these spreadsheets, and in fact it tends to be important on pretty much all of the sites that we deal with. Another thing that we like to see is a single line diagram which describes the layout of the site. This particular example is an extract. Eagle-eyed people will be able to identify perhaps 3 or 4 areas where we're going to be very interested in finding out more information about that site in order to determine the technical feasibility. This particular site, in fact, there are a number of significant changes which you would see on that single line diagram were I to present the as-built. Those were, in fact, relatively low cost, but they were very significant in terms of their operational impact, which enables demand response. And without going through those steps, reliable demand response can't be provided, and the revenue would therefore not be reliable either. So how long does all of that take? Well, it very much depends on the site. An indicative timeline is above. It depends partly on the complexity of the site, the organization, the chains of command, and so forth, but also on the actual hardware. On the bottom right, I've got an example of a cold store operator. Each of their sites, as we've rolled out through their estate, they started fairly quick, and they got quicker as they learned more and more about how we work. And their sites, because they're load management sites, they're relatively simple for us to deal with. XL London, on the other hand, has quite a complex and intricate standby diesel installation, and quite a lot of upfront work had to be done in order to make sure that the solution that we were putting in place at XL was correct and reliable and protected the core business operations of the site. And that point is the fundamental point in what we do. On our website, there are a number of frequently asked questions. I'm perfectly happy to take these or any other questions on the call that you may wish to put in. These are just some little sample. There are others on the website. And at that point, I'll probably just close by saying we work with, I think, now 25 companies, of which half would be blue chip household names, and the remainder might be known only to people in their industries. And I think at that point I'll hand back over to Phil.
Alistair, that's excellent, thank you. So we have had a few questions that have come through, Alistair, so I wonder if I could just quickly run through those with you. Two are kind of grouped together, so I'll deal with the first one. We run a 3-shift site that's a manufacturing process. How often is the Flextricity service going to be used?
Okay, well, obviously, in order to answer that question, I'd have to make some assumptions about the site. We would need to know more, but the question obviously is the type of asset that's participating. If, for example, we were talking about standby generators, I've mentioned earlier 50 to 100 hours per year. What that's made up of is store calls and triad management in the main. Triads runs probably 20 times in the year, and they will all occur during winter evening working day peaks. And short-term operating reserve calls make up the remainder of that running time. So essentially, it's a few times a month for slightly over an hour on each occasion for that type of site. If, on the other hand, they were participating by turning down load, it's about the length and frequency of load that site can accept. And we can put that in as if it were a standby diesel, if that's appropriate for that site, or we can make it operate more aggressively if that's appropriate. Combined heat and power sites, to the extent that they're available to us and not doing the day job of serving their heat customers over long run periods, they may be looking at 300 to 500 hours running per year even. And that means running often on most days. So the shift pattern of the site may not actually be the determining feature here, unless we're talking about load management, in which case it probably does affect it.
Okay, very good. And the other two questions, which I guess relates to that in terms of the broad structure of the running times and so forth, is two very simple questions that come down to how much money can we expect to make on an annual basis. Now, obviously, you've been through that already with the rate card information, Alistair, but could you give a gut feel on that?
Yes, again, it depends very much on the asset type and the site type. I think a nice guideline that we've tended to use in the past would be if the site were, for example, a medium-sized distribution centre and it's participating with standby diesel generators, then it might be looking at 100,000 per annum. That would be receipts net of fuel to the site owner. 30 to 40,000 per megawatt is what we tend to say in respect of relatively moderate to conservative running regimes, short-term operating reserve, and triad management. So that's per megawatt, and people can multiply up depending on where they are geographically and what type of running that they prefer.
Excellent. Well, I think that's been a very good overview, Alistair, and thank you very much for your time today. As everybody can see there, the final screen has our contact information on there. We would encourage you, of course, to use our contact form, which gives us the baseline of information that we would need to progress our discussions. Obviously, there is a telephone number there as well, and we would encourage you to speak to our engineers so you can have your detailed technical questions answered. And of course, we have the full-page guide, which we'll make sure that you have available to you at the end of this call. So just remains me to say thanks very much for your time, Alistair, and that was a very good overview of the Flextricity service. Thank you.
Thank you.